A Gal Gadot Fast and Furious return can work, but not in Fast X. Here's how Fast and Furious could bring Gisele back without retconning the films. A potential Gal Gadot return to Fast and Furious has been long speculated, yet there is a better option for it to happen than Gisele in Fast X. Following her introduction in Fast and Furious 2009, also known as Fast and Furious 4, Gisele returned for both Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 as part of Dominic Toretto's crew. Gisele died in Fast and Furious 6, which, for Fast and Furious, does not mean the character cannot return. Although Gisele was a villain of sorts at first, F9 retconned the character's past and established that Gisele had been working for Mr. Nobody since before the events of Fast and Furious 4. The many Fast and Furious retcons help explain why Gisele's return in Fast X seems such a plausible scenario, not to mention how Gal Gadot is now a much bigger star compared to when Gisele died. According to the Direct, Gal Gadot joined Fast X's cast in some capacity. There's a perfect Han and Gisele spin-off between Fast and Furious 5 and 6. Han and Gisele spent from 1 to 2 years driving around the world between Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6, meaning that there is a perfect Gisele and Han prequel story set between those two films. Although it's difficult to say how much time passed between Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6, the latter suggests that Han and Gisele lived through a few adventures before reuniting with Dominic Toretto's crew ahead of the Shaw mission. Han and Gisele's first scene in Fast and Furious 6 sees the duo in trouble in Hong Kong, which shows how action-packed their time together was. A Han and Gisele spin-off set between Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 would not even have to feel like a tie-in film, as whatever Han and Gisele did during that time didn't really affect the story of Fast and Furious 6. Granted, a Han and Gisele movie taking place before Fast and Furious 6 would make Han's Fast and Furious timeline even more complicated, considering his death in Tokyo Drift and surprising returns in Fast and Furious 4 and F9. Still, Gisele and Han had great chemistry, and the characters could undoubtedly carry on their own Fast and Furious spin-off. A Han and Gisele prequel is better than Gisele in Fast X. A Gisele prequel film that also features Han would be much better than a potential Gisele return in Fast X simply because it would not retcon yet another Fast and Furious character death. Han originally returned for 3 movies despite his death in Tokyo Drift, although with the help of a Fast and Furious timeline retcon. Letty, who died off-screen at the beginning of Fast and Furious 4, was then revealed to be alive at the end of Fast 5. Finally, F9 revealed that Han's death in Tokyo Drift was a fake-out. Therefore, Gisele's return in Fast X would be just too much. The Fast and Furious movies have a character stakes problem, which will only get worse if Gisele returns in Fast X. All major Fast and Furious character deaths will have been retconned, which will lower the stakes for Fast and Furious 11. That is why a Gisele prequel set between Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 would be a much better way of bringing Gal Gadot's character back to Fast and Furious. Considering that there is no indication of how much time passed between the two movies, there could even be multiple Han and Gisele films set in that period.